of glorification to Srila Rupa Goswami and honor two very beautiful bhajans that we sing regularly in the Mutt, Krishna Deva Bhavantam Avande and Radhe Jai Jai Madhavadaite, in just reflection and feeling the continued mood of our glorification to Srila Rupa Goswami. Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande,
Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande,
Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande,
Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande.
Mana Samadhukaram Arpaya Nija Pada Pankaja Makarande,
Mana Manasa Madhukara Arpaya Nija Pada Pankaja Makarande.
O Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande,
Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande,
Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande,
Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande.
Yadi api samadhishu vidya api pashyati natava natagamarichi.
Yadyapi samadhishu vidya api apashati natava nakagamarichi.
Idamechami nityam yatava chuta tarapi kripa guta vichi.
Idamechami nityam yatava chuta tarapi krita bhagavisham.
Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande,
Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande,
Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande,
Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande.
Bhakti Udam Shakti Yadi Api Madhava Natvai Mama Tila Matri.
Bhakti Rudanati Yadayapi Madhava Natvai Mama Tila Matri.
Parameshwara Tatra Gita Vadika Durgata Gata Navidhatri.
Parameshwara
Tatra Gita Vadika Durgata Gata Navidhatri. O Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande,
Krishna Deva Bhavantam
Vande, Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande,
Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande.
Ayam Aviloya Tayarya Sanatana Kalita Bhutara Sabara.
Ayavamilota Tayarya Sanatana Kalita Bhutara Sabara.
Nivasatu Nityame Hamrita Nindini Vidan Madhuri Masara.
Nivasata Nityame Hamrita Nindini Vidan Madhuri Masara.
O Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande,
Krishna Deva
Bhavantam Vande, Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande,
Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande.
Mana Mahana Samadhukaram Arpaya Nija Pada Pankaja Makarande. Mana Samadhukaram Arpaya Nija Pada Pankaja Makarande. O Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande,
Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande,
O Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande,
Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande.
O Krishna He, Krishna He, Krishna He, Krishna He,
Krishna He, Krishna He, Krishna He, Krishna He.
O Prabhu He, Prabhu He, Prabhu He, Prabhu He,
Prabhu He, Prabhu He, Prabhu He, Prabhu He.
Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Gaite, Radhe Jaya Jaya
Madhava Daite,
Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Madhava Daite.
Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite.
Gokula Tarani Mandala Mahite.
Gokula Taruni Mandala Madhite.
Gokula Tarani Mandala Mahite.
Gokula Taruni
Mandala Mahite. O Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite.
Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite.
Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite.
Radhe
Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite. Damodara Rati Vardhana Veshe Hari Nishkuta Binda Vipineshe.
Damodara Rati Vardhana Veshe Hari Nishkuta Vinda Vipineshe.
Damodara Rati Vardhana Veshe Hari Nishkuta Binda Vipineshe.
Damodara Rati Vardhana Veshe Hari Nishkuta Vinda Vipineshe.
O Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite.
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 Vrishabhanu Dahadi Navashashi Leke Lalita Saki Guna Ramita Vishake.
Vishabhanu Dadi Navasashi Leke Lalita Saki Guna Ramita Vishake.
Vrishabhanu Dahadi Navashashi Leke Lalita Saki Guna Ramita Vishake.
Vishabhanu Dadi Navasashi Leke Lalita Saki Guna Ramita Vishake.
O Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite.
Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite.
Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite.
Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava
Daite. Karumai Karanambarite Sanaka Sanatana Bahanita Charite.
Karuna Gurumai Karuna Bharite Sanaka Sanatana Varnita Charite.
Karumai Karanambarite Sanaka Sanatana Bahanita Charite.
Karuna Gurumai Karuna Bharite Sanaka Sanatana Varnita Charite.
O Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite.
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 Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Jaya Shri Radhe.
Jaya Radha Madhav Jaya Radha Madhav Radha Madhav Jaya Shri Radhe.
O Radhe 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 Radhe
Radhe Radhe Radhe Radhe.
O Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna
Krishna Krishna Hare Hare
Hare Rama
Hare Rama Rama Rama
Hare Hare.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Gaura Hari Bol
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol
Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Jaya Nityananda Rai Jaya Nityananda Rai Nityananda Rai Jaya Nityananda Rai
Jaya Nityananda Rai Jaya Nityananda Rai Nityananda Rai Jaya Nityananda Rai.
Jaya Sachinandan Jaya Gaura Hari Sachinandan Jaya Gaura Hari
Jaya Sachinandana Jaya Gaura Hari Sachinandana Jaya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaura Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Oh Jaya Radha, Madana Mohan Radha, Madana Mohan Radhe. Jaya Radha, Madana Mohan Radha, Madana Mohan Radhe. Jaya Radha, Govinda Radha, Govinda Radhe. Jaya Radha, Govinda Radha, Govinda Radhe. Jaya Radha, Gopinata Radha, Gopinata Radhe. Jaya Gopinata Radha, Gopinata Radhe. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe.
Jai Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Ganhavika Giridhari Radha Binod Bihari Ju Ki Jai. Sachinandana Gaura Hari Ki Jai. Jai Madan Mohan Ju Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Lila Prabhishta Om Asto Tarasar Shishimat Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Lila Prabhishta Om Asto Tarasar Shishimat Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Nitya Lila Prabhishta Om Asto Tarasara Shishimat Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Jagat Guru Nitya Lila Prabhishta Om Asto Tarasara Shishimat Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Mahabhagavat Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Saptam Goswami Srila Sachidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Srila Baladevi Dibhushan Gaudi Brantaracharya Ki Jai. Srila Vishnath Chakravarti Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Narottam Srinivas Shyamananda Prabhu Tray Ki Jai. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami Ki Jai. Jai Shri Rup Sanatan Shri Bhata Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopal Bhattacharya Raghunath Sad Goswami Prabhu's Ki Jai. Swarup Damodar Rai Ramananda Gaura Prasada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Siga Hosi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Shri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Ganga Jamuna Ki Jai, Buriyat Madanga Ki Jai, Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Nam Bhajan Ki Jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sashan Chakra Ki Jai, Nrsingadev Bhagavan Ki Jai. Prahlad Maharaj Ki Jai, Anantakota Vaishnava Rinda Ki Jai, Gaut Premanandi. Om Agina Timirandasya Gyananjala Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Jena Tasmaya Shri Guruve Namaha Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadavaktaya Namo Namaha Yam Pravajantamana Paityama Paitikrityam Dvaipayano Viraha Katara Ajuhava Putre Titam Mayatayo Taravo Binidustam Sarvabhutam Munim Pridim Anatoshmi. I first of all offer millions and millions of Dandavat pranams unto the lotus feet of our most beloved Gurudev. Nitya Lila Prabhishta Om Asto Tarasara Shishimat Shila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And the same again millions of times unto the lotus feet of our beloved Nitya Lila Prabhishta Om Asto Tarasara Shishimat Shila Bhaktivedanta Swami Shila Prabhupada. And all our Rupanuga Guru Vargya, my Dandavat pranams. So today I want to recap our 18th chapter. So we've just concluded the 18th chapter. We're ready to gallop into the 19th chapter, but the 18th chapter was very intense indeed. It was very dense to assimilate and absorb and appreciate. So there are a couple of purports in Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada's Chaitanya Charitamrita, explaining exactly the same topics that we've discussed, principally in the chapter 18 of Vivartavad and Mayavad and Sankaracharya, etc. But Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada explains them so beautifully and so simply and so elegantly that we can capture it immediately. So today I want to spend our time reading through these 2 or 3 commentaries by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, actually, that Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada is quoting in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's in the Madhya Lila, chapter 7.
Adi Lila.
Oh, sorry, Adi Lila. Adi Lila, chapter 7, verse 121. So if you have that, we can read together. So, verse 121. The translation is, in his Vedanta Sutra, Srila Vyasadeva has described that everything is but a transformation of the energy of the Lord. It's actually such a simple conception, but Sankaracharya has put a twist on it and is saying that everything is manifesting from a transformation of the Lord himself, but it's the Lord's energy. So it's actually very simple, but still we need to understand it fully. So in his Vedanta Sutra, Vyasadeva has described that everything is but a transformation of the energy of the Lord. Sankaracharya, however, has misled the world by commenting that Vyasadeva was mistaken. Thus, he has raised great opposition to theism throughout the entire world. Sankaracharya's teachings took hold from 800 AD until Ramanuja manifested about 1125, 1135, I think it was like that. So something like 200 years. And he was such a powerful personality, Lord Shiva himself. He was able to attract so many jivas to this Mayavad philosophy. And it took root even today in India very, very deeply. So this has to be clearly perceived and purified and cut. So this is what this is all about. Thus he raised great opposition to theism throughout the entire world. So purport. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains in the Vedanta Sutra of Srila Vyasadeva, it is definitely stated that all cosmic manifestations result from transformations of various energies of the Lord. Sankaracharya, however, not accepting the energy of the Lord, thinks that it is the Lord who is transformed. He has taken many clear statements from the Vedic literature and twisted them to try to prove that if the Lord or the absolute truth were transformed, his oneness would be disturbed. Thus, he has accused Srila Vyasadeva of being mistaken. In developing his philosophy of monism, therefore, he has established Vivartavad, or the Mayavad theory of illusion. In Brahma Sutra, 2nd chapter, the first aphorism is as follows.
Tad anvayatam arambhan shabdadbhiha.
Commenting on this sutra in his Sarika Bhasya, Sankaracharya has introduced the statement
Vacharambhanam vikaro nama deyam.
from the Chandogya Upanishad 6.1.4 to try to prove that acceptance of the transformation of the energy of the Lord is faulty. He has tried to defy this transformation of energy in a misguided way, which will be explained later. Since his conception of God is impersonal, he does not believe that the entire cosmic manifestation is a transformation of the energies of the Lord. For as soon as one accepts the various energies of the Absolute Truth, one must immediately accept the Absolute Truth to be personal. We can underline this in our books. As soon as you accept it's the energy, then it has to be a personality who is providing the energy. Immediately, it's personal. So Sankaracharya was requested by the Lord to establish this. So he's doing like this. He's establishing the personal as impersonal. A person can create many things from the transformation of his energy. For example, a businessman transforms his energy by establishing many big factories or business organizations, yet he remains a person, although his energy has been transformed into many factories or business concerns. The Mayavadi philosophers do not understand this simple fact. Their tiny brains and poor fund of knowledge cannot afford them sufficient enlightenment to realize that when a man's energy is transformed, the man himself is not transformed, but remains the same person. It's so simple. But the Mayavad can't. Why can't he understand it? Because he wants to be the center of attention. He wants to be God, ultimately. That impersonal conception wants to leave God out of the picture and actually make a space for himself to be there. So he deliberately, man's mind will deliberately obstruct the truth for his own purposes. Not believing in the fact that the energy of the absolute truth is transformed, Sankaracharya has propounded his theory of illusion. This theory states that although the absolute truth is never transformed, we think that it is transformed, which is an illusion. Sankaracharya does not believe in the transformation of the energy of the absolute truth, for he claims that everything is one, and that the living entity is therefore also one with the Supreme. This is what I just said. He believes that he is one with the Supreme. We have a particle of Krishna, that spiritual potency. We have that particle, all of us, within us. And as we, on this journey of self-realization, come to appreciate more and more, there's a certain tremendous potency in realization of that particle of Krishna within us. The bhakta is always understanding this is like super soul. This is connecting me to my soul and then my activity to serve Krishna. But the impersonalist, he's considering, oh, this is my greatness, that particle. So it's a fact that it can very easily be twisted if men want to go that route, if they want to be like God. And we see many powerful demons on the planet. They have the ability to do all kinds of different things. Mystical personalities also. They have the power to produce all kinds of illusions in the world. All kinds of personalities. God men, they call them. India has a history of these people like that because they've come to this particle of spirituality within themselves and haven't understood, yes, that's my soul. And then what is my soul's activity? But it's to serve the super soul, Paramatma, or service to Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan immediately. They actually consider that that is them. So it's a reality that we're talking about, how the Jnani, they can come to this point of realizing that particle of absolute purity. Vibhinamsa, we are separated parts of Krishna. It's a fact. Sankaracharya does not believe in the transformation of energy of the absolute truth, for he claims that everything is one and that the living entity is therefore also one with the Supreme. This is the Mayavad theory. Srila Vyasadeva has explained that the absolute truth is a person who has different potencies. Merely by his desire that there be creation and by his glance, sa akshata, he created this material world, sa asrijata. After creation, he remains the same person. He is not transformed into everything. This is just like the businessman, like the example Prabhupada just said. One should accept that the Lord has inconceivable energies and that it is by his order and will that varieties of manifestations have come into existence. In the Vedic literature, it is said,
स तत्वतो ज्ञात बुद्धिर विकार इति उदारतः.
this mantra indicates that from one fact, another fact is generated. For example, a father is one fact, and a son generated from the father is a second fact. Thus, both of them are truths, although one is generated from the other. This generation of a second independent truth from the first truth is called vikar. You see, the language, the vocabulary we have to be familiar with. Certainly in that chapter 18, it's talking about vikar. Vikar means transformation. It's changing. This transformation is there. This first truth is called vikar, or transformation, resulting in a byproduct. The Supreme Brahman is the absolute truth, and the energies that have emanated from him and are existing separately, such as the living entities and the cosmic manifestation, are also truths. This is an example of transformation, which is called vikar. This is the transformation, or parinam. To give another example of vikar, milk is a truth, but the same milk may be transformed into yogurt. This yogurt is a transformation of milk, although the ingredients of yogurt and milk are the same. In the Chandogya Upanishad, there is the following mantra.
ऐतद् आत्मायम् idam sarvam.
This mantra indicates that without a doubt that the entire world is Brahman. When we say Brahman in Jaiva Dharma, it's calling it Brahm. Prabhupada has made this easier for Western devotees. Like, there's actually no word called Brahman in the Vedic scriptures, but Prabhupada gave us this word to differentiate between Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma has a long A. I explained this the other day. But Brahm, which is referencing in Jaiva Dharma, means the Brahman. Prabhupada is calling it the Brahman. The absolute truth has inconceivable energies, as confirmed in the Shvetashvata Upanishad.
Parasya shaktir vividaiva shruyate.
See, to deny the energies, deny Radha. This is what it comes down to. You're denying the existence of Sri Radhika, who is that Shakti Tattva. And the entire cosmic manifestation is evidence of these different energies of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is a fact, and therefore, whatever is created by the Supreme Lord is also factual. Everything is true and complete, Purnam. But the original Purnam, the complete absolute truth, always remains the same.
Purnata purnam udyachyate purnasya purnamadaya.
The absolute truth is so perfect that although innumerable energies emanate from him and manifest creations which appear to be different from him, he nevertheless maintains his personality. He never deteriorates under any circumstances. It is to be concluded that the entire cosmic manifestation is a transformation of the energy of the Supreme Lord, not the Supreme or Absolute Truth himself, who always remains the same. So this was the ingredient that Mahaprabhu purified all the sampradayas. All the sampradayas were unclear on this point until Mahaprabhu advented and proclaimed this Shakti Parinamvad. The opposite to that is called Vastu Parinamvad, that Krishna is transforming. No, Krishna is not transforming. That's what we have to be very clear on. It's like we have the sun planet, for example, is like Krishna. Then there's so much heat. That's the energies radiating out from the sun planet. The sun planet isn't transforming at all, but the energies of the sun planet, they are influencing the whole environment. But the sun planet is not transforming in any way. The sun planet remains the same. And the beautiful example, what's that? Yata Mahanti Bhutani, this fourth verse of the Chatushloki, that the five elements, the five principal elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, have their own separate existence. Yet all those five elements exist in every single living entity. Every single living entity in existence is composed of earth, water, fire, air, and ether, to different degrees. But all living entities are composed of those five ingredient elements. And yet, the elements themselves have their separate existence. So this is the principle that is being discussed. We need to know this because we will meet people of this Sankaracharya mentality, or just plain simple Mayavadis who want to proclaim that they are God. This needs to be, otherwise why would Prabhupada give us so much information about this? He nevertheless maintains his personality. He never deteriorates under any circumstances. It is to be concluded that the entire cosmic manifest. Did I read that already?
Yes.
I did. Where did I read down to?
The material
The
world.
material world and the living entities are transformations of the energy of the Lord, the absolute truth or Brahman, who is the original source. In other words, the absolute truth, Brahman, is the original ingredient, and the other manifestations are transformations of this ingredient. This is also confirmed in the Taittiriya Upanishad.
Yato va imani bhutani jayante.
This entire cosmic manifestation is made possible by the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this verse, it is indicated that Brahman, the absolute truth, is the original cause, and that the living entities, jivas, are the cosmic manifestation, and the cosmic manifestation are effects of this cause. The cause being a fact, the effects are also factual. They are not illusion. Sankaracharya has inconsistently tried to prove that it is an illusion to accept the material world and the jivas as byproducts of the Supreme Lord, because in his conception, the existence of the material world and the jivas is different and separate from that of the absolute truth. With this jugglery of understanding, Mayavad philosophers have propagated the slogan,
Brahma satyam jagan mitya.
which declares that the absolute truth is fact, but the cosmic manifestation and the living entities are simply illusion, or that all of them are in fact the absolute truth, and that the material world and living entities do not separately exist. It is therefore to be concluded that Sankaracharya, in order to present the Supreme Lord, the living entities, and the material nature as indivisible and ignorant, tries to cover the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He maintains that the material cosmic manifestation is mritya, or false, but this is a great blunder. If the Supreme Personality of Godhead is a fact, how can his creation be false? It's so simple. For a bhakta, it's so simple, but for someone who's so hell-bent on being God, they cannot understand it. Their ignorance will cover their intelligence, is the point. Even in ordinary dealings, one cannot think the material cosmic manifestation to be false. Therefore, Vaishnava philosophers say that the cosmic manifestation is not false, but temporary. I can remember when I was a brand spanking new devotee, this was the first question I asked. Is this world false or temporary? The very first question I ever asked this. I had to know that because the conditioned souls has no idea of that. They actually want to think it's false because it's so painful, and they want to jump out of it somehow or other. So they want to consider that it's false, it's not real. So let me do something that's even more unreal and pretend that I'm like God. But when we understand it's temporary, it's real, but it's temporary, it's not eternal, this material world would be annihilated. It is separated from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But since it is wonderfully created by the energy of the Lord, to say that it is false is blasphemous. Non-devotees factually appreciate the wonderful creation of material nature, but they cannot appreciate the intelligence and energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is behind this material creation. Why? Because they want to claim it for themselves. They want to exploit it for their own pleasure. They don't want to serve it. Sripad Ramanujacharya, however, refers to it in a sutra from the Aitattreya Upanishad,
Atma va idam agra asit.
which points out that the Supreme Atma, the Absolute Truth, existed before the creation. One may argue, if the Supreme Personality of Godhead is completely spiritual, how is it possible for him to be the origin of creation and have within himself both material and spiritual energies? To answer this challenge, Sripad Ramanuja quotes a mantra from the Taittiriya Upanishad 3.1, which states,
यतो वा इमानि भूतानि जायन्ते येन जातानि जीवन्ति यत् प्रयन्ति अभिवम् अभिशंविशन्ति.
This mantra confirms that the entire cosmic manifestation emanates from the absolute truth, rests upon the absolute truth, and after annihilation again re-enters the body of the absolute truth, the supreme personality of Godhead. The living entity is originally spiritual, and when he enters the spiritual world or the body of the Supreme Lord, he still retains his identity as an individual soul. We never lose our identity as an individual soul. Even if you merge into the Brahman, you lose any consciousness of being an individual soul, and yet still that identity in the Brahman is contributing to illuminate the Brahman. This is how Rupa Goswami explains in his Lagu Bhavanamrita. He explains that when the jiva merges into the Brahman, his illumination will enhance the Brahman to some degree. So he's still essentially retaining his identity as serving Krishna. Jivera Sarupoi Krishnera Nitidas. We are eternally like that, whether you try to be something else or not. The living entity is originally spiritual, and when he enters the spiritual world or the body of the Supreme Lord, he still retains his identity as an individual soul. In this connection, Sripad Ramanuja Acharya gives the analogy that when a green bird enters a green tree, it does not become one with the tree. It retains its identity as a bird, although it appears to merge with the greenness of the tree. To give another analogy, an animal that enters a forest keeps its individuality, although apparently the beast merges with the forest. Similarly, in material existence, both the material energy and the living entities of the marginal potency maintain their individuality. Thus, although the energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead interact within the cosmic manifestation, each keeps its separate individual existence. It's so important. We were saying previously about in group dynamics, sometimes the individual can lose his identity amongst a group, because amongst a group they manifest like a subtle identity representing that group. But if you merge into that subtle identity and lose your own personal identity, your strengths are weakened. And I described the example like when the gopis, they run to see Krishna. They don't run as a group. They all run individually. And when they come to Krishna, then they manifest as a group there, but they are always their individual selves. Very, very much so. If they weren't their individual selves, how could Krishna relish any ras with each of those individuals separately at different times? That has to be there, that dynamic. So we always have to retain our own personal identity, come what regardless. Similarly, in material existence, both the material energy and the living entities of the marginal potency maintain their individuality. Thus, although the energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead interact within the cosmic manifestation, each keeps its separate individual existence. Merging with the material or spiritual energies, therefore, does not involve loss of individuality. According to Sri Ramanujacharya's theory of Vaishishtadvaita, although all the energies of the Lord are one, each keeps its individuality, Vaishishtya. His philosophy is called Vaishishta Advaitavad. There is speciality within the oneness. He was the first one to start purifying the philosophy of Advaitavad. Sankaracharya is establishing that philosophy of Advaitavad. Then Ramanuja is the first of the Sampradayas. Vallabha Acharya was previously, but he wasn't, his Sampradaya wasn't formed there. The first one is actually Ramanuja, and then Madhvacharya, like that. Sripad Sankaracharya has tried to mislead the readers of the Vedanta Sutra by misinterpreting the words Ananda Maya Vyasat, that he has even tried to find fault with Vyasadeva. All the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra need not be examined here. However, since we intend to present the Vedanta Sutra in a separate volume. Interesting. He never did that. Okay, I think we'll read the next one also. This is all helping us really place these teachings of the 18th chapter. I was just saying previously that after reading these, if we again read the 18th chapter, it'll be like a silk road. It'll be so simple to actually appreciate everything so easily. So this is very helpful for our um, absorption of this 18th chapter in Jaiva Dharma. Why is Bhaktivinoda Thakur giving us this um, clarity on what is Mayavad and what is Vivartavad? Because it exists so prominently still in the world today. When man wants to be God, he eclipses his own fortune. He goes above his own fortune and he tries to take the role of master. And we see it everywhere all the time. Sometimes even amongst devotees, they'll suddenly start to feel that they are the Lord of everything. And then they become angry when their will isn't accomplished like that. So it's not just a group of certain people. It's inherent that when some progress is made on the journey of our spiritual realization, then this illumination internally will begin to manifest. And if I start to think that that illumination is me, but at the same time, who am I? I am a servant of Krishna. If I start to think in my illusion that I am that supreme, that's when Mayavad is really manifesting in the jiva. So, verse 122, according to Sankaracharya, by accepting the theory of the transformation of the energy of the Lord, one creates an illusion of indirectly accepting that the absolute truth is transformed. This is called Vastu Parinamvad. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur comments that if one does not clearly understand the meaning of Parinamvad, or transformation of energy, Shakti Parinamvad, we can say, one is sure to misunderstand the truth regarding this material cosmic manifestation and the living entities. In the Chandogya Upanishad 6.8.4, it is said,
सन्मूलः सौम्येमः प्रजः सदान्त्यः सत्प्रतिष्ठतः.
the material world and the living entities are separate beings and they are eternally true, not false. Sankaracharya, however, unnecessarily fearing that by Parinamvad, transformation of energy, Brahman would be transformed, Vikari, has imagined both the material world and the living entities to be false and to have no individuality. By word jugglery, he has tried to prove that the individual identities of the living entities and the material world are illusory, and he has cited the analogies of mistaking a rope for a snake or an oyster shell for gold. Thus, he has most abominably cheated people in general. You see, people, we talk about the cheaters and the cheated. They want to be cheated. They want to believe that they actually are that supreme. And then they think they can enjoy this material energy. As long as the conditioned soul has that conception that he can find happiness here in this world, he will travel down that path of misconception and illusion. So this teaching of Sankaracharya was very much welcomed by the ignorant, conditioned souls. Sankaracharya didn't have to work so hard. People flocked to him, and they still are embracing his philosophy. The analogy of misunderstanding a rope to be a snake is mentioned in the Mundakya Upanishad, but it is meant to explain the error of identifying the body with the soul. Since the soul is actually a spiritual particle, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Mamaivamsa Jiva Loke, it is due to illusion, Vivartavad, that a human being, like an animal, identifies the body with the self. So this is the massive misconception of everyone until they are purified, until they really have love of God within their hearts. They are considering that the body is the self and putting all the attention on the bodily nature, the bodily activities, etc., the bodily circumstances, my place, this, that, so many details that take up all our time, all mental concoctions, all revolving around the bodily material conception. So even devotees, of course, are immersed in the bodily conception until, by the power of the holy name, they are purified of the what is the absolute reality, the goal. It is due to illusion, vivartava, that a human being, like an animal, identifies the body with the self. This is a proper example of vivart, or illusion. The verse
अतात्वो ज्ञातबुद्धिर्विवर्त इति उदारतः
describes such an illusion. To not know actual facts and thus to mistake one thing for another, as for example to accept the body as oneself, is called vivartavard. Every conditioned living entity who considers the body to be the soul is deluded by this vivartavard. It's everywhere, isn't it? You've just been traveling all over the world preaching. Everyone is illusioned about principally their identity. They all are considering that they're the body, and how can they enjoy? Because the nature of the soul is to enjoy. So if I'm not turning my vision inwardly, then it's externally seeking pleasure from material objects. And the whole world is immersed in this misconception. And this is called Vivartavad, not the Vivartavad that it'll be explained. One can be attacked by this Vivartavad philosophy when he forgets the inconceivable power of the omnipotent personality of Godhead. This is why it's so magnificent performing Harinam Sankirtan, because even subconsciously, people have to think of Krishna. There's no greater activity for the soul, the conditioned soul to perform is than Harinam Sankirtan in this age. It's the greatest mercy that anyone can offer to the world. How the Supreme Personality of Godhead remains as he is, never changing, is explained in the Isopanishad.
पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते.
God is complete. Even if a complete manifestation is taken away from him, he continues to be complete. The material creation is manifested by the energy of the Lord, but he is still the same person. His form, entourage, qualities, and so on never deteriorate. Srila Jiva Goswami, in his Paramatma Sandarbha, comments regarding the Vivartavad as follows. Under the spell of Vivartavad, one imagines the separate entities, namely the cosmic manifestation and the living entities, to be one with Brahman. This is due to complete ignorance regarding the actual fact. The absolute truth, or Parabrahman, is always one and always the same. He is completely free from all conceptions of existence. He is completely free from false ego, for he is the full spiritual identity. It is absolutely impossible for him to be subjected to ignorance and fall under the spell of a misconception, Vivartavad. The absolute truth is beyond our conception. One must admit that he has that one must admit that he has unblemished qualities that he does not share with every living entity. He is never tainted in the slightest degree by the flaws of ordinary living beings. Everyone must therefore understand the absolute truth to possess inconceivable potencies. This is so beautiful. I feel very encouraged that we have gone through the whole 18th chapter, because actually reading this now is just so illuminating. If we hadn't really studied this 18th chapter closely together, these texts wouldn't be so simply accessible for us. So this is the benefit of studying Jaiva Dharma. When we study Jaiva Dharma, we can appreciate these commentaries so much more easily. There's no difficulty for us whatsoever in these conceptions, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur is bringing all these conceptions into this Dasmula, this Achintya Beda Abeda. We are one yet separate from Krishna. Okay, this is verse 123. I'll just read a little bit more. Verse 123. Transformation of energy is a proven fact. It is the false bodily conception of the self that is an illusion. That is the Vivartavad. We need to get these terms clear, because for many, if we don't put our head into this at some point, it'll just be blurry. But my Gurudev wanted us to understand these topics, and that means understanding the various vocabulary, vikar, vivartavad, parinamvad, shakti parinam, etc. Purport: the jiva, or living entity, is a spiritual spark who is a part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unfortunately, he thinks the body to be the self, and that misunderstanding is called vivarta, or acceptance of untruth to be truth. The body is not the self, but animals and foolish people think that it is. Vivarta, illusion, does not, however, denote a change in the identity of the spirit soul. It is the misconception that the body is the self. The body is the self. That is an illusion. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not change when his external energy, consisting of the 8 gross and subtle material elements listed in Bhagavad Gita, Bhumir Apo Nala Vayu, acts and reacts in different places. Text 124. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is opulent in all respects. Therefore, by his inconceivable energies, he has transformed the material cosmic manifestation. By using the example of a touchstone, which by its energy turns iron into gold and yet remains the same, we can understand that although the Supreme Personality of Godhead transforms his innumerable energies, he remains unchanged. Although a touchstone produces many varieties of valuable jewels, it nevertheless remains the same. It does not change its original form. How many times do we have to hear it? Should I continue reading? Or do you have any question? Tell me. Speak very loudly.
In the verse previously, Prabhupada was saying, energy. If we accept energy, then we must accept the source, which is a personality. But also, some groups, they're only worshiping Shakti, like only like energy is supreme. Is it not? There's also a group.
That's their ignorance.
Yeah.
It's like in Islam, there's a word, Allah can refer to the light, but we don't have any experience of light without a source, without an origin. And if you speak to a Muslim, you should ask him, well, if Allah means light, what is the source of that? What is the source of that light? Because Islam is quite impersonal. What is the source of that light? There has to be a source to it. So in that sense, if someone is a Shakti, a Shakta, and just worships the energy of the Lord, that's their misfortune and their ignorance. And I think that's very easy to purify by asking them, well, if there's energy, there must be a source to that energy. Where is the energy? Have we an experience in this world of energy that doesn't have a source? It's the same example as the light. Our electric light here must have an energy source. What is the nature of that source? And that source must be personal if he can provide energy. It must be a personal source, the energetic of the universe. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Fully?
Yeah.
Explain it back to me.
I mean, it doesn't make sense. It's a shame if someone is worshiping energy as supreme, because we don't have any experience ever of energy coming from something without a source. And then if someone says like, oh, but spirituality is beyond our
Or
experience,
we worship nature,
yeah.
for example, just nature. Where's nature coming from? Who's the creator of nature? Who's the creator of the energy? Having a source means the creator. It indicates a creator. It indicates a personality. If someone is creating, there must be a person who's creating. The void can't create if it's nothing. If Brahman is nothing, how can it create anything? How is it possible to create anything if it's nothing? So the creation must have a creator. But the difficulty is that the individual doesn't want to bow the head and accept the ultimate truth. This is the difficulty. It's so simple that a child can understand it. But the desire of the individual to be that Almighty is the obstruction. That's the obstruction in the Shaktas, for example. They're just worshipping the energy. They worship Kalima, etc., the energies of the Lord. But they don't want to understand anything beyond that. There has to be desire to understand something further. If that desire hasn't been inspired within them to inquire further or to appreciate a higher source, that's our job, to inspire them by describing the personal form of the Lord.
It's interesting how, like, from the beginning, if we're reading Prabhupada's books from the start, it's like always drilled into us these concepts, like how ultimately God is a person and things like that, and these ideas of just worshiping energy and things. It seems like so almost
Foreign.
silly. Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
like doesn't make sense.
Right.
But then people are so in that
Yes.
mentality,
Yes.
and then
Just like we are into the personal mentality,
the same.
they are as much energetically into that mentality. We have to always appreciate that with empathy, you know? And how can you transform that? With the potency of affection initially, by being tolerant, and sometimes we have to listen to what they say and then look for a space to actually jump in. Because whatever they're going to say ultimately is going to be false at one point, because it's a misconception. And we have to smell for that misconception and then purify it. But it's a cultivation. The whole world doesn't want to accept theism.
Yeah.
The whole world is hell-bent. It's Kali Yuga, the darkest moments of Kali Yuga. They are determined to find some juice in this material world. So they're looking to the energy in one way or another. But actually they're being tricked, because the energy is Radha. So in a sense, it's Radha who they're being attracted to, if we can just make that known to them. It doesn't take very much, really and truly, because every conditioned soul wants affection. Every conditioned soul wants love. Every conditioned soul is crying for love, but they just don't know where it is.
And people really don't want God to have a form.
No.
They really don't want.
And then he'll start telling them what to do. That's the last thing they want, especially today. This anarchistic mood of get off my back, No one wants to be told. No one wants to bow down. It's the condition of the world. That's why this Harinam Sankirtan, because this is the greatest weapon and potency of Mahaprabhu. This is sound vibration, which can penetrate into the heart of the listener, even unconsciously. It's like a medication. The ignorant soul doesn't have to know the ingredients of the medication. He just has to take it. If you give, an Aboriginal an aspirin, it'll work on him. He doesn't have to know it, understand it, etc. So the ignorant conditioned souls, when they hear the sweetness of the Harinam, whether they're attracted or not, still some effect will be there. This is the remarkable nature of this Mahavira. Okay, so I think we'll stop. But I'm very grateful to have had this opportunity to refresh. There's a couple more, 4 or 5 more pages if you feel that we haven't quite covered everything on this topic. There's more, but it's saying eventually the same. It's the energy that is the transformative ingredient, not the source. The source is stable. Krishna never transforms. His Swarup is perfect. He's always dancing in Goloka Vrindavan.
I have a question now. I understand that we have individuality. As you said, we are, even though we are one in nature, but we have individuality. How do we reconcile this fact with when we are somebody's energy? How can we have individuality?
Does a child have individuality? A child has the father's energy, the mother's energy from birth. That's its source, its origin. But the child still retains its individuality. Its energy is manifesting from the mother and father. But it's still, this is a jewel that's described in chapter 16. The jewel of the Jiva has this independence. He retains this always throughout. That independence signifies individuality, right? Right?
Yeah, okay, on this, building on this, so when a sadhak, he trades the path of bhakti, like Shraddha, Bhajana Kriya, Anatanavati, and his Guru Ashraya, from there onwards, does he, uh, because I've not traded the path, I want to know how does the nuances work with the Guru, and after that, when he gets into the spiritual world, where there is tadatmya, all those things. So how the individuality still being there?
It must be there. If love is to manifest, if the Shishya loves the Guru, then the Shishya has his own personality and own way of demonstrating that affection to the Guru. He has to use that independence. In the spiritual world, it's that independence, individuality that is so attractive to Krishna. When Krishna sees 300 billion gopis, they all, every single one of them, so unique in the rasas they have to exchange. But if that individuality, if that independent individuality, we tend to think that independence means something perhaps negative in a sense, that I'm doing something that I want to do, but I independently choose to serve Krishna. That's the only place that love can manifest, when I personally decide to serve Krishna. That's why we have to have independence. If we had no independence, there would be no love, no real love. So all the way through, that has to be growing in our different focuses. And in the spiritual world, it's there, of course. But it's a jewel. In the 16th chapter, this is what Bhaktivinoda is explaining. The jewel of independence. Nice. Good. Okay. Jaiva Dharma ki jai. Independence ki jai. Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sublime purports. Thank you so much for your patience today. I think this was very important to reconcile and to complete our 18th chapter study. Jai. Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Goprinandi Hari Hari Bo. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha. Kripa Sindhave Vacha Patitanam Pavnibhyo Vaishnave Namo Namaha.